Okay, so we finally got an update to the print runs all the way up till Dusk Till Dawn, which is very exciting, very interesting, right? We took a look at this and we just rambled off our initial thoughts. So I thought, why don't we actually dig a little bit deeper this time and go over a few things of notes and, things of interest to me personally, which would be the shift in design choice by LSS. So we can see from the totals, right, that sets have been reined in since 2.0 and have been a lot more conservative, which is fantastic because, we were getting to the point of hyperinflation due to, again, some unsavory things at the time of Monarch to, again, going to 2.0, where it was reined in, and we're at a very comfortable amount, it seems, right? There's a lot of interest and hype around boxes at their release. They don't dip a huge amount, right? It's more they get overestimated at release and then, a month or two over, and then they settle. And yeah, so overall, that's really healthy to see. But one thing we can take it a little bit further is to actually look at the population of certain cards, right? We can go to, for instance, the Welcome to Wraith page, and we know there's 5 Legendaries, 1 per 96. We know there's 10 Majestics, 1 per 12, 15 Super Rares, and we can look at the ratio of, say, Majestics to Legendaries or Super Rares to Legendaries in a play capacity, right? Because in any meta deck, for instance, right, a Legendary that's relevant to that hero, well, you need 1 copy. For a Majestic, you might need up to 3. So a ratio of 1 to 3 is probably where, you want things sitting, if not, a bit more desirable for the Majestics, since there's going to be a lot more of them overall in total, that you want them to hold a bit more value, and, you want the ones that are actually playable to make up for the ones that aren't playable, and everything to settle nicely so that the cards still have, monetary worth for some people. So looking at it through that lens, we can go through all the sets and we can sort of see how LSS have shifted the total amount of the total population of X card. Now, the starting point for us is going to be the good old Emperor, right? Because this is probably the most interesting one. So the rarest card in Flesh and Blood, well, technically are the 10 CLSR cards, right? And then there's 10 of them, that's why I say technically. But then we have the Marvel Enigma, right, where there's just 100 in total. We now know, thanks to the print run of Dynasty, how many rough Emperors, right, Marvel, full, Majestic Emperors out there, right? And that total comes to about 403, which makes them slightly, only slightly, rarer than what the Alpha Hearts or Beta Heart is estimated at, right? We look at it as 1 in 40 boxes, 1 in 960 packs, so roughly 400 hearts and 400 eyes are out there. Well, again, we'll go specifics. I have the numbers somewhere here as I gloss over. 417, 418, right? Rough odds, versus 403 to the Emperor. So again, he's somewhat comparable to Alpha and Beta Fables, right? Now, that's not technically the case because then you have Nostalgia, you have the Inception, or the fact that, again, these are the Alpha and Beta sets, and also playability, right? An eye and a heart is significantly more playable than the Emperor himself, but he's still a extremely rare card, right? He's now 3rd, right? You got the serialized cards, you have Marvel Enigma, then you have Emperor, then you have Alpha and Beta Hearts and Eyes, right? So that is very interesting to me because obviously he is quite the substantial pull, right? Again, he won't have the big factors that help the eye and the heart go significantly higher in value, but he's still, if you can get your hands on one, fantastic to have, right? So, after that, is there anything else I wrote of noteworthy? No, it's pretty much just the Emperor, right? So, we'll start with Welcome to Wraith. Okay, so in terms of Majestics, now these numbers we already knew, but again, I want to zero in on the ratio because that's what's kind of important to me, right? From the perspective, again, of what is playable and, whether or not there is too much of something out there in the world, right? So for Legendaries, for Welcome to Wraith, when we look at Alpha, there's roughly 835. When we look at Unlimited, there's 12,400, right? So that's a sizable amount. Then when it comes to Majestics, there's about 3,300, right, of each. That's the important thing to remember here, of each. And for Unlimited, there is around 50,000, right? We'll round, right? So that ratio for Welcome to Wraith, when it comes to first edition, is 1 to 4. For every 1 Legendary, there are 4 Majestics. Now, it doesn't note anything, and I don't think they would have, But obviously you have generic Majestics, which are in more of a demand than class-specific Majestics because, right, they go in everyone, whereas the class Majestics go just in the classes. So I would like to see them take that into account. And to date, the only things that get short printed when it comes to cards is equipment. But I would like to see them put more thought into the generic slot and the fact that there should be more of a population, right? This is where we get the bottleneck for instance, in Lion Strike when it comes to Welcome to Wraith, because there is just many copies of that as there is any given class Majestic. So you have one class fighting over a class Majestic, and then you have 4 classes, in the case of Welcome to Wraith, fighting over in Lion Strike, since it fits so well, no matter who really wants to play it, right? Well, not as much as, you say, the deck tech of Command and Conquer, but the numbers for Welcome to Wraith and Arcane Rising are very, very similar, except for the Unlimited. But yeah, that is worth noting. So yes, the ratio of Legendary to Majestic is 1 to 4, right? So slightly more Majestics than what you'd need for an optimized deck. When it comes to Super Rares, which are, pseudo Majestics, eventually they get sandwiched together, the ratio is 1 to 5.3. So Super Rares in terms of playability, right? Because there are more of them to make up for that 1 per 6. They're still desirable. There's still not, a huge difference in the ratio of how many there are available per Legendary to X deck, which again is the scope in which I want to look at all this in, because that's what, goes to me. These cards should be holding value, these cards should be dwindling in value, because again, if this hero is meta, his Legendary is meta, then the Majestic should rise as well, because again, you want the Legendary and you want the playable Majestics. Alright, so Arcane Rising, exactly the same, right? Except for Unlimited, which is just a lower volume, because overall Arcane Rising had less Unlimited printed, but they both had the same amount of initial boxes. So again, it's still that 1 to 4 and 1 to 5.3. When it comes to Klloo, now this is where the Legendary becomes a bit more impactful, because we only have 2, right? We have the very desirable Tunic, or Krunic, right? And then we have Cheyenne. So fortunately, there is a huge population of Cheyennes, right? So again, comparatively to any given Legendary from Arcane Rising or Welcome to Wraith, there's roughly 835, whereas with Crucible of War, despite obviously the harder rate of pulling a Legendary, there is roughly 1,800 Cheyennes, right? Well, closer to 1,900 Cheyennes. So, it more than doubled, right? That's the big thing to look at. So they didn't quite tweak it in the way I would have liked, right? And again, thought put into equipment, hero, and generics in terms of short printing, because again, their desirability, especially at this stage, right? It's it's rough waters for Crucible of War, but at the state we're in now, for instance, how they took out the Rainbow Foil Enigma, because it's a Blitz, right? It's not that exciting. If you pulled in Legendary, you'd have the sad Emperor feels of these, the lesser versions. So that is wonderful thought. And I'm glad to see that we can look at it like that, right? We can go, well, China is a fantastic card, right? I'm proud to own one. I would very much love to see Shapeshifter be fully fleshed out, but, one day, not anytime soon, unfortunately. So overall, again, it is just good to put that in perspective, to understand that they do acknowledge that types of things and how they deal with it. So yeah, heroes done, equipment's done. Just waiting on the short prints of generics, well, I should say the overprinting of generics, to increase the ratio, right? To make them more available, since again, they fit in a vastly higher number of decks than any specific class card, right? Or talented class card. So yeah, for the Legendaries, right, the total population for first edition is roughly 1,900. For Unlimited is 6,300. Again, rounding. So that's how many tunics, right, are available. So in total, was that 9,000? No, 8,000. There's 8,000 tunics in total across both versions of Klloo, versus Welcome to Wraith, where there should be technically 13,000, give or take, right? So overall, Krunics are rarer, right? But you've got the whole Rainbow Fall aspect and everything like that. In terms of the Majestic to Legendary, right? Now that Supers are part of Majestics, it has been reined in, right? So instead of, sitting somewhere between 4 to 5 per one Legendary, it's actually coming down to 3.3. right? So we're at that golden ratio of 1 to 3 when it comes to a playable Majestic versus a playable Legendary, right? So that's very interesting to see. Then when we get back to Monarch, right, things shift a little bit and Majestics become a little bit more common. So when it comes to the Legendaries, right, there's 6 Legendaries, 1 per 96. So overall for Monarch, first edition, there is roughly 5,208 Legendaries, right, of each. And then for Unlimited, 7,541. And the ratio of Legendary to Majestic is 4.6, right? So there's a surplus of 1.5 Majestics per Legendary when, again, we look at it in the scope of playability. All right, then for Tails, this is the interesting one to me because, again, Tails, the amount of Unlimited boxes that actually hits the world is less than the first edition. So that makes all of the Unlimited or Rainbow Foil cards, well, when it comes to equipment, Legendaries, and the Fable, right, rarer than first edition. So we have a total of 9,454 Legendaries for Tales of Aria, right? So a substantial increase if we look at the first few sets, right? But not as many as the Unlimited of Welcome Wraith, sort of similar to Arcane Rising, right? When you look at Unlimited and Unlimited Plus first edition. But overall, Welcome Wraith really has the substantial pool of Legendaries that sort of beats out everything but Monarch, looking at the table, right? It comes close, well, Everfest comes close to it, but overall, there's a ton of overall Legendaries from Welcome to Wraith, right? So it's interesting because then you chuck the history packs on top of that. But for Tales of Aria, again, there is 9,454 of any given Legendary for first edition, and only 3,454 for Unlimited, right? So there's 1/3 the amount of Rainbow Foils to Cold Foils. And then when it comes to the Legendary to Majestic, the ratio is 4.8, right? So again, we're still hitting that trend of over the golden ratio. So I would like to see it reined in, and guess what? Does. It starts getting really reined in. So for Everfest, overall, the total of Legendaries is 11,450, and then 2, right? There should be roughly 2 of each copy, potentially, in the 40 displays of Everfest Unlimited. So again, these are, you know, technically the rarest cards. I account the 40 being held by LSS, right? So there was an interview pointed out to me with Flippin' Box where James states, right, that the majority of boxes are held by LSS, and there was one case that got out, right? So that case is definitely worth, or it's an anomaly that makes it very exciting, right, to leave as a sealed case. But technically, in the 40 boxes that LSS has, there could be. I say could be because the thought is basically, right, that a larger amount was printed and then LSS destroyed a lot of boxes. Well, I wouldn't say, you know, thought. We've got the whole statement. Where is it? Yeah, Everfest Unlimited is yet to be released. So I would say at that point there was a larger amount of boxes that have been recycled, right? So when it comes to the ratio now of Legendaries to Majestics, it is 1 to 2.6. The problem, though, with Everfest is there is a bunch of jank Majestics, right? 45 Majestics overall, so it's by far larger than the majority of other sets, 27, 31, and the reason for that is we have, well, it's actually larger than Klloo, right? So we have the Carnival theme Majestics, so 1 per 26. Now, I tried to look into it, and I can't find it anywhere, whether or not they appeared in both, right? Whether it was just an extra Majestic as a Carnival theme, but then in the initial 1 per 4, you can still find a Carnival theme Majestic. I vaguely remember being able to pull it in either slot, right? So overall, there is some skewing there. Because of that, normal Majestics might be a little bit short printed. It's very minor, but yeah. Overall, right, there is good Majestics, and then there are quite the number of not so good Majestics when it comes to Everfest. But again, the ratio is definitely desirable, right? 1 Legendary per 2.6 Majestics, but it's not really that playable of a set. especially when you look at, the legendaries with Silver Palms being one of them. All right, and then Uprising. So start of 2.0, where we get the breakdown of Rainbow Foils, 1 per 80, and Cold Foils, 1 per 220 packs. So when it comes to Uprising, right, and we look at Cold Foils, which I believe there was no EAs in Uprising, right, because that will be something that we get to when we go to Outsiders and Dusk Till Dawn. But there is roughly a population of 3,854 Cold Foil Legendaries, again, of each, right, versus 10,600 for the Rainbow Foils. So that is a drastic shift, right? If we compare it to Monarch, which would probably be the best point to compare it to, we had 5,000 to 7,500. Now we have roughly 4,000 to 10,000. So Rainbow Foils have become a lot easier to pull. Well, well, technically, yes, they are easier to pull because it's 1 in 80. They're a lot more accessible is the phrasing we're using, right? And Cold Foils were made scarcer along with the Fab 2.0 model to try and retain their value a bit better. When it comes to the Majestics, so the overall total of legendaries, what we're looking at here, both Rainbow Foils and Cold Foils, the ratio is 1 to 3.2, right? So that's really starting to hit the mark where, again, it's the right amount of Majestics, given how popular Classic Constructed is, to the amount of Legendaries. So again, if any of these heroes come back to the limelight and their Legendary becomes a lot more desirable, then their playable Majestics should also, because again, there's not a huge surplus of them available. For every 1 Legendary, it's the same amount of Majestics, with the exception of, again, Legendaries that see duality, or I say triality, right? Flamescale Furnace, technically, in Emperor as well, right? Then Dynasty. So we have, again, the rates, Rainbow Foil 1 to 88, and the Cold Foil 1 to 280. So again, made slightly harder to pull here. And the population is now slightly dwindled, right? We have 2,880 for the Cold Foils, and then we have 9,163 in total of each Rainbow Foil Legendary. And then, of course, again, we already mentioned the Emperor. He has a rate of, or I should say a population of 403 in total. And now, interestingly, when it comes to Majestics, right, so the ratio hasn't changed. It's still 1 to 4, but there is a huge increase to the volume of Majestics. Again, more so than the other supplemental sets, Everfest or Klloo, and substantially more than any normal set. So 27 jumps all the way up to 51, meaning that the ratio, again, of any specific Majestic to specific Legendary is 1 to 1.6, right? So, again, if there were a substantially more playable Majestics overall in Dynasty, they'd be really, really tough to find. But, in terms of surgical extraction, which has been short printed in Dynasty itself, extremely rare when you look at it through the lens of, again, having the right Legendary or having everything you need, the complete deck tech for any given hero. The ratio, if you want cards from Dynasty, is very, very on the nose. So the Majestics from Dynasty across the board, I think, should all be kind of more desired, right? Especially the Rainbow Foil, because they are, in terms, again, of the scope of playability, and even in the total population compared to other sets from 2.0, they are less, right? We have roughly 47,000 of any given Majestic for Uprising versus only 20,000 when it comes to Dynasty, right? Outsiders. So Outsiders is when stuff gets a little bit more complicated, because while there is 5 Legendaries, there's more than that in terms of the Cold Foil, because you have the Extended Arts. Now, the rates of the Extended Arts are quite minimalistic, so their impact isn't huge, so we'll roughly do this, right, where we just look at Rainbow Foil and Cold Foil in the same scope. So Rainbow Foil for Outsiders is roughly 11,500 when it comes to the Rainbow Foil, and then Cold Foil is roughly 3,000, again, give or take a bit, because there are the Extended Art Trench. There was 2 Extended Arts out of the 5, I believe. Flick Knives wasn't. What else? I can't remember off the top of my head, right? We're also not touching Marvels, and we'll leave off with the Fables, because, again, we have what people have thought, but that's not concrete, right? But the ratio is, again, still sticking to around 1.7, right? So they've really reined in the amount of Majestics, right? So which should make them all, again, a lot more impactful when a hero, circles around and becomes extremely relevant. Then Dusk Till Dawn. is even more convoluted because we're just told 1 per 64, right? So while there are 8 legendaries, we now have the Rainbow Foil, we now in some circumstances have the Cold Foil and the EA. So we could work out the total, but again, it's going to be skewed, right? What portion of the 1 per 64 is attributed to Rainbow Foils, what is attributed to Cold Foils, what is attributed to the Extended Art Cold Foils. Overall, Rainbow Foil legendaries have been made more common than ever, right, versus that of Cold Foils and their other counterparts, right? But this concept was also dropped. We stopped seeing both Cold Foils and Cold Foil EAs and just moved to, sometimes having EAs for Cold Foils, and if they are, then no normal Cold Foil for the legendaries. So overall, we could roughly look at it as a total of 8,200 of any given legendary, but that is going to be way off and skewed in some direction, and overall, we can't attribute, again, what is per the Rainbow Foil version, what is per the Cold Foil version, but roughly, right? Roughly. And then for the Majestics, we have a 56 to 1 per 4, which gives us a ratio of, again, 1 to 2, roughly. It's probably less. It's probably still in line with what we're seeing with Dynasty and Outsiders, where it's about 1 to 2 per legendary, which I think is probably where it needs to be. Again, to weed out the non-playable Majestics and help make the playable Majestics hold and retain decent value, especially, again, when a hero circles around. So, yeah, I think that is a worthy perspective to view it all in, right? Because, again, a big aspect to Flesh and Blood and its collectability nowadays is playability. So looking at it through that scope of how many legendaries in population, how many Majestics in population, how many will go into a deck. Again, 1 legendary to 3 Majestics in most cases. So, yeah. Overall, LSS are showing that they're growing, or they have become more and more conservative overall when it comes to printing, and that's pretty fantastic. But, something has to give when that happens. So again, the ratio of Legendary to Majestic has dwindled, meaning that the ratio of, say, Legendaries to Commons, or Commons overall, or Rares overall has increased, and that's what's driven us to this point of just needless amount of bulk, in a sense. So that is something to also put in perspective, and they can't rein in, say, the size of a booster pack, because it's at that sweet spot for drafting and for the expansion slot. So overall, I kind of view this as it would kind of be time to return Super Rares, right? Have that desirable, have them maybe niche, have all talented cards potentially be Super Rares, or have them be higher than Majestics, since, again, you've got the desirability of a generic Majestic going into a lot more decks than a class-specific Majestic versus a hero-specific or a talented, well, a specialized Majestic. So if they started breaking it up in that sense, I'd be over the moon, right? To see, again, generics, or I should say every other Majestic short printed rather than just equipment or heroes as we're seeing, right? To then, again, go in the scope of, well, these will definitely be the really desirable cards because they're the generics, right? And then that will sort of help even out the playing field, and we won't get bottlenecks like Light Strike or Art of War or Command and Conquer or anything from the lay sets like, Dust Till Dawn. It's Warmonger's Recital? No. Warmonger's... No, it's not Warmonger's at all. You all know straight away. No, it is Warmonger's. I gotta look this up now. Well, I can just do this. It's not Recital. Warmonger's... Come on. Spirit Diplomacy. There we go. Right? Is the very desirable one from Dust to Dawn, again, in the generic slot. So everyone wants a piece of it. So again, if that was overall... again, God, what's the reverse term for short printed? So also, I'm looking over here because I've put it onto this monitor rather than this monitor, like usual. And this monitor has all the math for the sets. But yeah, so I would like to see that step taken next, right? Again, reining in class cards, reining in talent cards, reining in specializations, and, just making sure that there is not, a huge amount of generics, but, if you keep that ratio of 1 to 3 for generics, and then you rein in class-specific cards to 1 and 1 to 2, right, per legendary, I think that would be a good ratio to keep in terms of collectability and chase. But yeah, we could do Marvels, and we could do Fables, if you guys want, right? I can look through Reddit and see what all the pull rates are calculated at. But other than that, right, there's my little piece, my 2 cents to add to all the print run talk. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.